gave a ride to a Japanese man. The next day, 4 helicopters landed in my backyard. Jack was running late to pick up his daughter from school when he saw the man standing in the rain. The Japanese man, around 60 years old, held a soaked briefcase and stared helplessly at the cars passing by without stopping. Something about the desperate look in the man's eyes made Jack pull his old car over to the curb. "Need some help?" Jack asked, rolling down the window of the Ford Focus 2005 he'd worked so hard to get. The man approached slowly, rain streaming down his thin face and fogged-up glasses. He wore a simple suit, but Jack noticed that even soaked, it looked expensive. "Please, sir, my phone isn't working, and I need to get to Mercy General Hospital." "It's very urgent," the Japanese man said in perfect English with just a slight accent. Jack hesitated for a second. He really was late, and Emily, his 12-year-old daughter, would surely be waiting in the rain too. But something about the quiet desperation in the man's eyes touched him deeply. "Get in. I'll take you there," Jack said, unlocking the door. The Japanese man got in carefully, placing the wet briefcase on his lap. Jack noticed his hands were trembling slightly. "Thank you very much, sir. My name is Kenji Yamamoto," he said, adjusting his glasses. "You're very kind." "Jack Miller. Don't mention it, man. Everyone needs help sometimes," Jack replied, speeding toward the hospital. As they drove through Portland, Jack watched his passenger in the rearview mirror. Kenji stared out the window with an expression that mixed anxiety and something that looked like nostalgia. His clothes, even drenched, had a cut different from what Jack was used to seeing. "Do you live here in town?" Jack asked, trying to break the tense silence. "No, Kenji paused, as if choosing his words carefully. "I'm visiting. Someone very important to me. Someone I haven't seen in many years." Jack sensed there was more to the story, but respected the silence that followed. When they arrived at Mercy General, Kenji grabbed Jack's arm before getting out. "Mr. Jack, you did something very important today. More important than you realize," Kenji said, looking straight into Jack's eyes. "May I have your phone number? I'd like to repay your kindness." Jack hesitated. He wasn't used to such formality, but something in Kenji's sincerity convinced him to share his number. "You don't have to repay anything, Mr. Kenji. It was just a ride," Jack said, but wrote the number on a crumpled sheet Kenji pulled from his briefcase. "To you it may have been just a ride. To me it was much more," Kenji replied, stepping out of the car. "Thank you very much, Jack Miller. We'll talk soon." Jack watched Kenji disappear through the hospital doors and then headed to pick up Emily. The girl was indeed waiting in the rain, sheltered only by the school's awning. "Dad, you're late," Emily complained, climbing into the car, soaked. "Sorry, sweetie. I helped someone on the way," Jack explained, feeling a pang of guilt. "You always do that, Dad. Mom's right when she says you're too soft-hearted," Emily said, but without malice. She knew her father had a tender heart. On the way home, Jack couldn't get Kenji out of his mind. There was something different about that man, something he couldn't quite define. The way he spoke, carried himself, said goodbye. It was as if that chance encounter held more weight than it seemed. When they reached their small house in Riverside Heights, Karen, his wife, was already home making dinner. She worked as a nursing assistant at the neighborhood clinic and always got home before them. "Late again," Karen said, kissing Emily. "Jack, did you forget today's the credit card payment day?" Jack's stomach sank. With the rush of the day, he had truly forgotten, and he knew money was tight once again. "Karen, Jack began. "Dad gave a ride to a Japanese man," interrupted Emily, taking off her wet school uniform. Karen looked at Jack with that expression he knew well. It wasn't anger, more like resigned exhaustion. After 15 years of marriage and the last 5 years of financial struggles, she was tired of her husband's excessive generosity. "Jack, we've talked about this. You can't keep stopping to help everyone when we can barely help ourselves," said Karen, stirring the pot harder than necessary. "He was just an old man in the rain, Karen. I couldn't leave him there," Jack defended himself. "What if he was a robber? What if something had happened to you?" Karen shot back. "Emily would be left without a father, and I'd be a widow because of your hero complex." Jack knew she was partly right. Ever since he lost his job at the manufacturing plant 2 years ago and started working as a rideshare driver, Things at home had been tense. Every penny counted, every extra expense weighed on their tight budget. "He said he'd repay the kindness," Jack murmured, knowing how pathetic it sounded. "Oh, Jack, how many times have you heard that?" Karen sighed. "Remember the guy you drove to the airport for free because he claimed he lost his wallet? Remember the woman you helped move? Has anyone ever repaid you?" Jack stayed silent because he knew she was right. He had a tendency to trust people too much, to help without thinking of the consequences. It was a flaw he'd carried since childhood, when his mother always said he had a heart of butter. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. That night, Jack struggled to sleep. He kept thinking about Kenji, the urgency in his eyes, the way he said that ride was important. There was something about that man he couldn't forget. The next day, Jack woke up early for work. The rideshare app was slow as it had been for months. Portland was full of drivers and the competition was fierce. He drove all morning and managed only 3 short trips. It was almost noon when his phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello?" Jack answered, expecting a passenger. "Mr. Jack, this is Kenji Yamamoto. You gave me a ride yesterday," said the familiar voice. Jack could hardly believe it. "Mr. Kenji, how are you? Did you get everything sorted at the hospital?" "Yes, I did. And that's why I'm calling." Kenji's voice sounded different, more serious. "Mr. Jack, I need to speak with you in person. It's about the repayment I mentioned yesterday." Jack felt a mix of hope and suspicion. Karen was right about the empty promises he'd heard before. "Look, Mr. Kenji, it was just a ride. You don't need to." "Mr. Jack," Kenji interrupted firmly, "can you come to Mercy General Hospital now, room 412? It's very important." Curiosity won over caution. Jack agreed to meet and headed to the hospital. Room 412 was private, he noticed from the sign on the door. Kenji waited for him in the hallway, wearing the same suit as the day before, now dry and pressed. "Mr. Jack, thank you so much for coming," said Kenji, shaking his hand firmly. "I'd like you to meet someone." They entered the room, and Jack saw a Japanese woman in her 80s lying in bed. She was awake and smiled when she saw Kenji. "Arrive. Naomi-san, this is Jack Miller, the man I mentioned," Kenji said in English so Jack could understand. The woman said something in Japanese, and Jack noticed tears in her eyes. "She's thanking you," Kenji translated. "You know, Jack, may I call you Jack? Naomi is my older sister. We hadn't seen each other in 45 years. Jack felt a shiver. 45 years was nearly his entire life. "We were separated during the war when we were children," Kenji continued. "She stayed in Japan with our grandparents, and I came to the United States with our parents. I lost contact with her for decades." Kenji stepped closer to the bed and took his sister's hand. "I only found out she was here in Portland a week ago. I flew from Japan immediately, but yesterday, when I arrived, I was lost, desperate. My phone wasn't working, I didn't know the city, and she was..." His voice broke. "The doctors said this might be my last chance to see her." Jack felt a lump in his throat. He began to grasp the magnitude of what had happened. "If you hadn't stopped to help me yesterday, I might have been too late," Kenji said, wiping his fogged glasses. "Rao gave me the chance to say goodbye to my sister after nearly half a century." The emotion in the room was palpable. Jack felt small in the face of the moment he'd helped make possible. "Mr. Yamamoto, I had no idea," Jack murmured. "Of course you didn't, but you did the right thing anyway," Kenji replied. "And that's why I want to repay you, not just for the ride, but for what it meant." Kenji pulled a business card from his briefcase. "Jack, I'm the director of a tech company in Japan. I also have important connections here in the United States. I'd like to offer you a job." Jack looked at the card. It was in Japanese and English. "Kenji Yamamoto, Regional Director, Yamamoto Industries." "A job?" Jack asked, confused. "Yes. We're expanding our business here in the Portland area. We need someone trustworthy, someone who knows the city, someone with a good heart," Kenji explained. "I thought of you immediately." Jack felt a mix of hope and suspicion. It seemed too good to be true. "But I don't have a degree, Mr. Yamamoto. I drive for a rideshare app. I don't know anything about tech," Jack said. "You don't need to know tech right now. You need to understand people And you clearly do, Kenji replied. You'd be a local representative, helping us understand the culture and needs of the region. Jack fell silent, processing the offer. It felt unreal. Can I think about it? He asked. Of course. But Jack, there's something you should know, Kenji said, lowering his voice. This opportunity could change your life, but it might also bring complications. Big companies always have complex situations. Jack didn't fully grasp what Kenji meant, but he nodded. He said goodbye to the siblings and left the hospital with his head spinning. On the drive home, Jack tried to make sense of it all. Part of him was excited by the possibility of change, of finally giving Karen and Emily a better life. Another part was wary. Things like this didn't happen to people like him. When he got home, Karen was folding laundry in the living room. Emily was doing homework at the kitchen table. "How was your day?" Karen asked without looking up from the clothes. Jack told her everything. About the phone call, the meeting at the hospital, the sibling story, the job offer. Karen listened silently, her expression unreadable. "Jack, this all sounds very strange," she said when he finished. "Rich people don't just offer jobs out of nowhere to someone they barely know." "But Karen, you should have seen how emotional he was." "It was a huge moment for him," Jack argued. "What if it's a scam? What if this guy is using you for something?" "Say," Karen shot back. "Jack, you're so naive. The world doesn't work like that." "Dad, what's a scam?" Emily asked from the kitchen. "Nothing, sweetheart. Keep doing your homework," Karen said, lowering her voice. "Jack, we can't afford to take risks. If you lose the job you have now because of this crazy idea." "But what if it's real, Karen? What if this is our chance to turn things around?" Jack insisted. "And what if it isn't?" she countered. "What if you get yourself into trouble? Jack, you have a family. You can't gamble with our safety." Jack knew she was being cautious, but he felt this opportunity was special. There was something about Kenji that inspired trust. "I'll call him tomorrow and say yes," Jack said, making his decision. "Jack, no," Karen exclaimed. "At least look into this man first. Find out if this company really exists. Talk to other people." "Karen, sometimes you just have to have faith," Jack said. "Faith doesn't pay the bills, Jack," she replied, folding clothes with sharp, frustrated movements. That night, Jack and Karen slept in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Jack dreamed of modern offices and a life free from financial worries. Karen lay awake imagining every possible way things could go wrong. The next morning, Jack called Kenji early. "Mr. Kenji, it's Jack. I've decided to accept your offer," he said, before Kenji could even greet him. "Jack, so glad to hear that," Kenji replied, and Jack could hear the smile in his voice. "Can we meet today to discuss the details?" They arranged to meet that afternoon at the hotel where Kenji was staying. It was a modest hotel in downtown Portland, which reassured Jack a little. If this were a scam, the guy wouldn't be staying in such an ordinary place. When Jack arrived, Kenji was waiting in the lobby with a folder full of papers. "Jack, thank you so much for accepting," Kenji said, leading him to a quiet corner. "Let me explain your role in more detail." Over the next hour, Kenji explained that Yamamoto Industries was interested in forming partnerships with local businesses in Portland. Jack would be responsible for identifying opportunities, making initial contacts, and serving as a cultural bridge between the Japanese company and American partners. It would be part-time at first, Kenji explained. "You can keep your current job until we see how things develop. The starting salary would be $5,000 a month." Jack nearly choked. $5,000 was more than he made as a driver, even in his best months. "5,000, Jack repeated, stunned. "It's the least I can offer to start," Kenji said. "If things go well, there's room for growth." Jack signed a simple contract Kenji had prepared. It was in English and looked professional. Kenji gave him an advance of $1,000 and a list of local businesses to research. "Jack, there's one important thing," Kenji said before they parted ways. "In the coming weeks, some unusual things might happen. Different people may contact you asking questions about me or our company." "What kind of people?" Jack asked, starting to feel uneasy. "Competing businessmen, maybe some investigators," Kenji said vaguely. "It's normal when a foreign company starts operating in a new area. But it's important you're always honest about what you know." Jack didn't like the sound of that, but he chose to trust Kenji. The man had been completely transparent so far. When he got home with the money, Karen was speechless. "Jack, this is making me really nervous," she said, staring at the $100 bills. "Nobody gives money away like that for free." "It's not for free, Karen. It's an advance on my salary," Jack explained. "I'm going to work for it." "Doing what? You don't even really know what this company is." Karen shot back. "I'll figure it out. Kenji gave me a list of companies to research. I'll start tomorrow," Jack said. In the first week, Jack dedicated himself to researching the companies on the list. He visited a few, made contacts, and tried to understand the local market. To his surprise, he discovered that some companies were genuinely interested in partnerships with Japanese firms. Kenji called every day to check on his progress, always showing interest in the details and offering valuable suggestions. Jack began to feel confident he had made the right decision. It was in the second week that things started getting strange. Jack was eating lunch at home when the phone rang. Unknown number. "Mr. Jack Miller?" asked a formal male voice. "Yes, speaking," Jack replied. "This is Timothy Clark from the Internal Revenue Service. I'd like to ask you a few questions about your recent professional activities." Jack felt his blood run cold. "The IRS?" "Yes, sir. It's routine when we detect financial activity outside the usual pattern. Could you come to our office tomorrow?" Jack didn't know what to say. He'd never had any issues with the IRS before. "Can I ask what this is about?" Jack questioned. "Just a few questions about your new company, Mr. Miller. Nothing serious," Timothy replied. "Tomorrow at 2 p.m. Does that work?" Jack agreed, but was extremely nervous. When he told Karen, she exploded. "I knew it. I knew this whole thing was shady," Karen shouted. "Jack, you've gotten us into trouble." "Calm down, Karen. It might really just be routine," Jack tried to reassure her, though he was just as anxious. "Routine? Jack, the IRS doesn't call regular people for routine checks," Karen argued. "You must have done something wrong with that Japanese man." Emily came out of her room, startled by the yelling. "What's going on?" the girl asked. "Nothing. Sweetheart." "Go back to your room," Karen said, trying to regain her composure. That night, Jack barely slept. He kept imagining every possible scenario. What if Kenji was involved in something illegal? What if he had unknowingly become an accomplice to a crime? The next day, Jack went to the IRS office in downtown Portland. Timothy Clark was a serious man in his 50s who greeted him in a small, formal room. "Mr. Miller, thank you for coming," Timothy said, opening a file. "I'd like to ask about your new company, Yamamoto Industries. Can you explain what kind of work you do for them?" Jack told him everything he knew, from the ride to the signed contract. Timothy listened quietly, taking notes. "How long have you known Mr. Kenji Yamamoto?" Timothy asked. 2 weeks, Jack answered honestly, "and you agreed to work for him." "Based on what?" Timothy pressed. Jack recounted the meeting at the hospital, Kenji's sister, and how everything had unfolded. Timothy kept writing. "Mr. Miller, are you aware that Yamamoto Industries isn't registered in the United States?" Timothy finally asked. Jack felt the ground drop beneath him. "What do you mean, not registered?" "There's no company by that name registered in the country," Timothy explained, "which is odd, considering you signed an employment contract with them." Jack was speechless. How was that possible? "Mr. Miller, I'm not saying you did anything wrong," Timothy continued. "From what I can see, you may have been deceived, but I need you to tell me everything you know about Mr. Yamamoto." Jack repeated the whole story again, this time with more details. David asked more questions about the hotel where Kenji had been staying, about the papers he had signed, about the money he received. "I'll look into this situation," David said finally. "For now, I recommend you don't do any more work for this company and call me immediately if Mr. Yamamoto contacts you." Jack left the Internal Revenue Service office completely shaken. How could he have been so foolish? Karen had been right from the start. He had put his family at risk because of his naivety. When he got home, Karen saw his expression and immediately knew the news was bad. "What happened?" she asked. Jack told her everything, about the unregistered company, the possibility he'd been tricked, the warnings from the IRS agent. "Jack, I can't believe you did this to us," Karen said, starting to cry. "Now the IRS will be watching us. We'll have problems for the rest of our lives. Karen, maybe there's an explanation, Jack tried. Maybe it's just a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Jack, you worked for a company that doesn't exist. You took money from someone you don't even know, Karen shouted. How could you be so naive? Jack had no answer. He knew he'd made a terrible mistake. That afternoon, he tried calling Kenji several times. Every call went straight to voicemail. He went to the hotel where Kenji had been staying, but the receptionist said he had checked out 3 days earlier. Did he leave any message? Jack asked desperately. No, sir, he just said he had to travel for business, the receptionist replied. Jack returned home defeated. Kenji had disappeared, the company didn't exist, and he was under investigation by the IRS. How had he managed to ruin everything so quickly? Over the next few days, Jack tried to understand what had happened. He searched Kenji's name online but found nothing useful. He went back to the hospital to ask about Kenji's sister, but they told him no Japanese woman had been admitted in recent months. The truth began to take shape in Jack's mind. It had all been a lie. The sick sister, the company, the job opportunity. But why? What did Kenji want from him? Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us as we're just starting out. Now continuing. It was in the third week that things got even stranger. Jack was working as a rideshare driver, trying to get back to normal, when he got a ride request to a business address in downtown Portland. When he arrived, he saw it. It was a law office. The passenger who got into the car was a man in his 40s, dressed in a suit. Jack Miller, the man asked as soon as he entered. That's me, Jack replied, surprised the man knew his name. My name is Attorney Richard Johnson. I'm a lawyer, and I need to speak with you about Kenji Yamamoto, the man said. Jack's heart raced. You know Kenji? I do, and I know you're in a difficult situation because of him, Richard replied. I can explain better if you can come to my office. Jack cancelled the ride and followed Richard to the office. It was a simple but organized place. Richard led him to a private room. Mr. Miller, I'll be direct, Richard said. Kenji Yamamoto is my client, and he asked me to contact you. Where is he? Jack asked immediately. Why did he disappear? Why did he lie about the company? He didn't lie completely, Richard replied. Yamamoto Industries exists, but in Japan. The problem is that Kenji is having trouble getting the company's situation in the United States sorted out. Richard opened a folder and showed some documents to Jack. Look, these are the company's papers from Japan, said Richard. Kenji really is the director of Yamamoto Industries. The problem is that the US bureaucracy is proving more complicated than he expected. Jack examined the documents. They were in Japanese, but there were certified translations. It all seemed legitimate. But then why did he disappear, asked Jack? Because complications came up, explained Richard. It seems some competitors found out about Yamamoto Industries' plans in Portland and are trying to sabotage the process. What kind of complications? Jack pressed. Richard hesitated before answering. Mr. Jack, the situation is more serious than it seems. Kenji is being investigated for possible industrial espionage. Jack felt like he'd been punched in the gut. Industrial espionage? It's a false but serious accusation, Richard explained. Some competitors claim Yamamoto Industries is trying to steal trade secrets from US companies. And I'm involved in this? Jack asked, afraid of the answer. Unfortunately, yes, replied Richard. Since you were working for Kenji, making contacts with local companies, you could be considered part of the operation. Jack couldn't believe what he was hearing. From an innocent favor to a possible industrial espionage charge, it felt like a nightmare. What do I do now? Asked Jack. First, you need to understand you didn't do anything wrong, said Richard, but you should prepare for more investigations. Besides the Internal Revenue Service, other agencies may want to talk to you. What other agencies? Jack asked, growing more nervous. Possibly the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Richard answered. Industrial espionage cases are handled by them. Jack left Richard's office even more worried than when he arrived. The situation was spiraling in ways he never imagined. Now it wasn't just a problem with the IRS, but possibly the FBI too. When he got home, Karen saw his expression and knew there was more trouble. "Now what?" she asked, resigned. Jack told her about the meeting with Richard, the industrial espionage accusations, the possibility of being investigated by the FBI. "Jack, I can't take this anymore," Karen said, collapsing onto the couch. "We were living a simple, quiet life, and now you've gotten us tangled up in a federal mess." "Karen, I had no idea," Jack defended himself. "But you should have been suspicious," she shot back. "No one offers a stranger a $5,000 noose." "Job, Jack, how did you not see how fishy it was?" Emily appeared in the living room, clearly worried about the tension at home. "Dad, are we going to have to leave the house?" the girl asked. Emily's innocent question broke Jack's heart. His daughter was scared because of something he'd caused. "No, sweetheart. We're not leaving," Jack said, trying to sound confident. "Jack, don't promise what you can't deliver," Karen said, hugging Emily. That night, Jack lay awake thinking about everything that had happened. How had a simple favor turned into such a mess? Had Kenji planned this from the start, or was he actually telling the truth? The next day, Jack tried calling Richard for more information, but the secretary said he was in a meeting. He tried again, in the afternoon, but Richard didn't return his call. It was later that afternoon when something happened that changed everything. Jack was at home when he heard a strange noise outside. It sounded like something very heavy was approaching. He stepped into the backyard and saw something that left him completely frozen. 4 helicopters were approaching his house. Jack stood motionless in the middle of the yard, his hands involuntarily raised, unable to believe what he was seeing. The helicopters were large, black, and clearly official. The noise from the rotors was deafening. Karen and Emily appeared, at the door, equally stunned. "Jack, what's happening?" Karen shouted over the noise. Jack had no answer. He could only watch as the helicopters landed in his yard, the neighbor's yard, and the street in front of his house. Men in suits began stepping out. There were many of them, at least 20. Some were clearly federal agents, others looked like military personnel. One man approached Jack. He was tall, around 50, with a stern expression. "Mr. Jack Miller?" the man asked, holding up a badge. "That's me," Jack replied, his voice shaking. "Agent Robert Thompson, Federal Bureau of Investigation. We need to speak with you about Kenji Yamamoto and your activities related to national security." Jack felt his legs weaken. National security? How had it come to this? "Can I see that badge again?" Jack asked, trying to buy time to process what was happening. The agent showed it once more. It was official FBI. "Mr. Miller, let's go inside to talk," Agent Thompson said, "and I'll need your family to stay in a separate room while we speak." "Why? They haven't done anything," Jack said instinctively, protecting his family. "It's standard procedure," the agent explained. "They're not in trouble, but we need to speak with you privately." Other agents spread across the property. Jack saw them inspecting everything: the car, the garage, even the neighbors' yards. Inside, Agent Thompson sat at the kitchen table with Jack. Other agents stood nearby, making Jack even more nervous. "Mr. Miller, I'll be direct," Thompson said, opening a file. "You're involved, knowingly or not, in an international espionage operation." Jack felt like the world was spinning. International espionage? "Kenji Yamamoto isn't who he claimed to be," Thompson continued. "He's an economic intelligence agent who was using you to access information about strategic US companies." Jack couldn't believe what he was hearing. "But he was visiting his sister in the hospital." "There was no sister, Mr. Miller," Thompson said. "We checked. No Japanese woman has been admitted to that hospital in weeks." The truth hit Jack like a bucket of cold water. It had all been an act. Kenji had manipulated his emotions, exploited his tendency to help others. "Mr. Miller, I need you to tell me everything that happened from your first meeting with Yamamoto," Thompson said. "Every detail could be important for our investigation." Jack recounted the whole story again. The agent asked specific questions about the companies he'd visited, the information he'd gathered, the contacts he'd made. "Did you give Yamamoto any documents?" Thompson asked. "No, just basic reports on the companies I visited," Jack replied. "General information anyone could get." "Mr. Miller, you may not have realized it, But some of those companies work with sensitive technologies, Thompson explained. What seems like basic information can reveal a lot about strategic industrial capabilities. Jack felt even worse. Without knowing it, he'd helped in an espionage operation against his own country. "Am I going to be arrested?" asked Jack, afraid of the answer. "Not for now," replied Thompson. "We believe you were used without your knowledge, but we'll need your full cooperation to capture Yamamoto." "How can I help?" "He disappeared," said Jack. "He may not have." "Completely disappeared," replied Thompson. "We're monitoring all communications related to this operation. If he contacts you, we need to know immediately." For the next 2 hours, Jack was questioned by different agents. Each asked specific questions about different aspects of the operation. Jack told them everything he knew, trying to be as detailed as possible. When the agents finally finished, Thompson gave Jack clear instructions. "Mr. Miller, for the next few days, your home and phone will be under surveillance," explained Thompson. "It's for your protection and to assist the investigation." "Surveillance?" asked Jack. "Agents will be stationed in the area. If Yamamoto or any of his associates try to contact you, we'll be ready," explained Thompson. "Your phone will also be monitored to intercept any calls." Jack nodded, knowing he had little choice. "And my family?" asked Jack. "They're safe, but I recommend they stay close to home for the next few days," replied Thompson. "Just a precaution." When the agents finally left, Jack sat on the couch, completely exhausted. Karen and Emily, who had stayed in the bedroom during the entire interrogation, came back to the living room. "Jack, tell me what's going on," said Karen, clearly frightened. Jack told them everything the agents had said, about Kenji being a spy, about the industrial espionage operation, about being used without knowing. "I don't believe this," said Karen, shaking her head. "How did you get mixed up in something like this?" "I didn't know, Karen," Jack exclaimed. "I thought I was helping someone in need." "And now?" asked Karen. "Now our home is being watched by the FBI. Our daughter has to grow up in this environment?" Jack had no answer. He looked at Emily, who was clearly scared by the whole situation. "Dad, are those men coming back?" asked Emily. "I don't know, sweetheart," Jack answered honestly. "But they're here to protect us." That night, none of the three slept well. Jack kept thinking about how everything had gone wrong so quickly. Karen wondered what other complications might arise. Emily had nightmares about helicopters and men in suits. The next day, Jack tried to return to his normal routine, but it was hard. He knew he was being watched, that every move was being monitored. When he worked as a rideshare driver, he noticed cars that seemed to discreetly follow him. It was in the afternoon that he received a call that changed everything again. "Jack?" said a familiar voice. It was Kenji. Jack froze for a second, then remembered Agent Thompson's instructions. "Kenji, where are you?" Jack asked, trying to sound natural. "Jack, I need you to listen carefully," said Kenji, and Jack noticed he sounded tense. "Your life could be in danger." "What are you talking about?" asked Jack, confused. "The men who spoke to you yesterday weren't from the FBI," said Kenji. "They were agents from a rival company trying to frame me." Jack felt the world spin again. "What do you mean they weren't FBI?" "Jack, everything they said about me is a lie," Kenji continued. "I really am a businessman. Yamamoto Industries really exists, but there are powerful people who don't want us establishing business in the United States." "Kenji, they showed me official badges," said Jack. "Badges can be faked," replied Kenji. "Jack, you need to get out of there immediately. Your family is in danger." Jack didn't know who to believe. The agent seemed official, but Kenji sounded genuinely concerned. "How can I be sure you're telling the truth?" asked Jack. "If I were a spy, why would I call to warn you about the danger?" Kenji shot back. "Jack, you need to trust me. Take your family and go somewhere safe." "Where's safe?" asked Jack. "There's a hotel on Interstate 5 on the way to Seattle, the Highway Inn. Go there and call me from this number," said Kenji, giving him a different number. "And Jack, don't tell anyone where you're going." The call ended and Jack stood frozen, holding the phone, completely lost. He didn't know who to believe. The Federal Bureau of Investigation agent seemed official, but Kenji sounded genuinely worried about his safety. Jack went to the window and saw a car parked on the street that hadn't been there before. 2 men were inside, clearly watching his house. That confirmed he was being monitored. But by whom exactly? "Karen, we need to talk," Jack called out. He told her about Kenji's call, about the claim that the agents weren't real, about the suggestion to go to a hotel. "Jack, now you've completely lost it," said Karen. "You're going to believe a possible spy over federal agents?" "But what if he's right?" Jack insisted. "What if those men aren't really from the FBI?" "And how are we supposed to find out?" asked Karen. Jack thought for a moment. "I'll call the FBI and ask about the operation. If it's real, they'll confirm it." Jack dialed the general number for the FBI in Portland. After being transferred several times, he reached someone who could give information about ongoing operations. "Sir, I can neither confirm nor deny specific operations," said the employee. "But I can tell you there are no official operations in the area related to industrial espionage at this time." Jack felt his blood run cold. "What do you mean, no operation?" "I can't give further details, sir. If you have information about possible illegal activity, you can file a formal report," the employee replied. Jack hung up, his hands shaking. If there was no official FBI operation, who were those men who had come to his house? "Karen, I think Kenji was right," said Jack. "The FBI isn't running any operation here. That doesn't prove anything." "Jack," Karen countered, "it could be a covert op or another agency. Or it could mean those men aren't really officers," Jack insisted. Jack went back to the window. The car was still there, and now a second one was parked at the end of the street. If they were really federal agents, why hadn't they properly identified themselves when he called? "Karen, I think we should go to the hotel," said Jack. "Jack, if you're wrong, we'll be running from the FBI," said Karen. "That's a crime. And if I'm right, we'll be saving ourselves from criminals, pretending to be cops," Jack shot back. It was Emily who made the decision for them. "Dad, I'm scared," the girl said. "Can we go somewhere else for a while?" Jack looked at his daughter and made up his mind. Regardless of who was right, his family was frightened, and he needed to protect them. "Let's go to the hotel," said Jack. "At least there we can think more clearly about what to do." They quickly packed some clothes. Jack slipped out the back door to get the car from the garage. He noticed the men in the street couldn't see him leaving through the back. They managed to leave the neighborhood without being followed, at least not visibly. Jack drove through the city, taking alternate routes until he reached Interstate 5. The Highway Inn was a simple place, mostly frequented by truckers. Jack found it odd that Kenji had chosen a spot like this, but maybe it was precisely because it was somewhere no one would expect to find them. They checked in under fake names. Jack said he'd lost his ID and settled into a plain room on the second floor. "Now what?" asked Karen, sitting on the bed. "Now I call Kenji," replied Jack, pulling out the paper with the number he'd been given. Kenji answered on the second ring. "Jack, did you make it out?" Kenji asked immediately. "We did. We're at the hotel," Jack answered. "Kenji, you need to explain what's going on. My family is scared." "Jack, can I meet you there?" Kenji asked. "It's safer to talk in person." Jack glanced at Karen, who shook her head. "Kenji, first you're going to explain everything over the phone," Jack said. "Then we'll see about meeting in person." Kenji sighed. "All right, Jack, I'll tell you the whole truth. My name really is Kenji Yamamoto, and I do own a company in Japan. But it's not exactly a tech company." "Then what is it?" Jack asked. "It's a security and investigation firm," Kenji replied. "I investigate cases of industrial espionage for Japanese companies looking to invest in the United States." Jack didn't like where this was going. "You're a private investigator?" "Yes, but not a spy," Kenji explained. "Japanese? Companies hire me to check if it's safe to invest in certain areas, if there's unfair competition, that kind of thing." "And me? What was my role in this?" Jack asked. "You were my local contact," Kenji answered. "Outsiders draw attention when they start asking questions about local businesses. I needed someone from the area to help me." "But why did you lie about your sister?" Jack pressed. Kenji was silent for a moment. "Because I couldn't. Tell you the truth. If you knew I was a private investigator, you wouldn't have helped. I needed a story that would touch your heart." Jack felt used again. Even if Kenji wasn't a spy, he'd still lied and manipulated his feelings. "And Who were those men who came to my house? Jack asked. I believe they were employees of the Takeda Corporation, Kenji replied, a rival Japanese company that found out I was investigating the US market for my clients. And they pretended to be FBI? Jack asked, disbelieving. They have the resources for that, Kenji confirmed. The Takeda Corporation has contacts in the US, people who can provide fake IDs, official equipment. Jack was growing more confused. Kenji's story sounded plausible, but it could also be another lie. Kenji, how can I be sure you're telling the truth now? Jack asked. Because I'll show you all the proof, Kenji answered. I have company documents, contracts with my clients, everything that backs up what I'm saying. I can bring it all to you. Jack looked at Karen and Emily. His daughter was lying on the bed, clearly exhausted by the whole situation. Karen sat in a chair, her expression a mix of anger and worry. Kenji, I'll agree to meet you, Jack said, but with conditions. First, you come alone. Second, we meet in a public place. Third, if I don't like what you say, we never speak again. I accept all your conditions, Kenji replied immediately. There's a 24-hour diner on the interstate, 2 miles from the hotel. Can I meet you there in an hour? Jack agreed and hung up the phone. Jack, I have a bad feeling about this, said Karen. Me too, admitted Jack, but I need to find out the truth. Our lives have been turned upside down because of all this. Jack left Karen and Emily at the hotel and went to the restaurant. It was a simple place frequented by truckers and travelers. He arrived early and chose a table where he could see everyone coming and going. Kenji arrived right on time, alone, carrying a leather briefcase. He looked tired and worried, very different from the confident man Jack had met weeks earlier. Jack, thank you for agreeing to meet me, said Kenji, sitting down. Show me the proof, said Jack, cutting to the chase. Kenji opened the briefcase and pulled out several documents. There were contracts in Japanese with certified translations, company records, even photos of offices in Japan. This is my company, said Kenji, showing the papers. Yamamoto Security and Investigation. It's been around for 15 years. Jack examined the documents. They looked authentic, but he wasn't an expert to be sure. And these are contracts with my current clients, Kenji continued, showing more papers. 3 Japanese companies looking to invest in the Portland area hired me to assess the local market. Jack recognized some of the company names and saw impressive figures in the contracts. Why didn't you tell me this from the start? Asked Jack. Because it's confidential work, Kenji explained. If competitors knew my clients were interested in the US market, they could sabotage the investment plans. Like the Takeda Corporation? Asked Jack. Exactly, Kenji confirmed. They found out about my operation and are trying to frame me to scare my clients away from the US market. Kenji showed more documents, including emails that seemed to back up his claims about the Takeda Corporation. Jack, I know I lied to you at first, and I'm sorry for that, said Kenji, but I never meant to harm you or your family. You're in danger because of me. What kind of danger? Asked Jack. The Takeda Corporation won't stop until they get proof that I'm a spy, Kenji explained, and you're the only link they have to me. They might try to force you to give false testimony against me. Jack felt a chill. Force me how? They could threaten your family, your job, your freedom, said Kenji. They have the resources to create fake evidence, bribe officials, anything to get what they want. Jack fell silent, processing everything he'd heard. Kenji's story seemed consistent, but there were still too many unanswered questions. What are you proposing? Asked Jack. That you and your family stay hidden until I can expose the Takeda Corporation's operation, Kenji replied. I have lawyers working on it, but I need time. How much time? Asked Jack. A few weeks, maybe a month, Kenji answered. Jack shook his head. Kenji, I can't go into hiding for a month with my family. I have a job. My daughter has school. Our lives can't just stop. Jack, I understand your situation, but... Kenji began. No, you don't understand, Jack interrupted. You're a wealthy guy with resources. We live paycheck to paycheck. If I don't work, there's no money for food. Kenji was quiet for a moment. What if I cover all your expenses during this time? How do you mean? Asked Jack. I'll pay for lodging, food, whatever you need, Kenji explained. And once this is resolved, I'll also pay you compensation for the trouble. Jack hesitated. The offer was tempting, but it meant trusting Kenji again. "How much compensation?" asked Jack. $100,000, Kenji replied. Jack nearly choked. $100,000 was more money than he made in several years. "Kenji, that's a lot of money," said Jack. "It's what you and your family deserve for all the trouble I've caused," replied Kenji. "Jack, I know it's hard to trust me again, but I promise I'm being completely honest this time." Jack grew thoughtful. $100,000 would solve all the family's financial problems. They could buy a better house, pay for Emily's education, and live more comfortably. "I need to talk to my wife," said Jack. "Of course," replied Kenji. "But Jack, time is crucial. Every day we're exposed is another day of danger." Jack returned to the hotel with his head spinning. He told Karen everything: Kenji's documents, the explanation about the Takeda Corporation, the proposal to stay hidden for a few weeks. $100,000? Karen repeated, disbelieving. "That's what he said," Jack confirmed. Karen fell silent for several minutes. Jack knew she was weighing the pros and cons. "Jack, what if it's all a lie again?" Karen finally asked. "What if it's true?" Jack countered. "Karen, we'll never get another chance to earn $100,000. But what if we accept and something bad happens to Emily?" Karen asked. "No amount of money is worth our daughter's life." Jack looked at Emily, asleep in bed. His daughter didn't deserve any of this. "I'll call Kenji and tell him we refuse," said Jack. "Wait," said Karen. "Let me think a little longer." Karen went to the window and stared at the traffic on Interstate 5. Jack could see she was torn. "Jack, I have a counteroffer," Karen finally said. "We'll accept, but with conditions." "What conditions?" Jack asked. "First, we don't stay in the same place for more than 3 days. We keep moving between hotels," said Karen. "Second, I want $50,000 up front." $50,000 up front? Jack repeated. "If something goes wrong, at least we won't be left with nothing," Karen explained. "And third, if at any point we want to back out, he lets us go without any trouble." Jack thought the conditions were reasonable. He called Kenji and explained Karen's counteroffer. "I accept all the conditions," Kenji said immediately. "I can deliver the $50,000 tomorrow morning." "In cash?" Jack asked. "In cash," Kenji confirmed. "Jack, thank you for accepting. I promise you won't regret it." That night, Jack, Karen, and Emily slept better than they had in weeks. For the first time since this ordeal began, they felt some control over the situation. The next morning, Kenji arrived at the hotel with a small suitcase. Inside were $50,000 in $100 bills. "My God," Karen murmured at the sight of the money. "It's real. It's real," Kenji confirmed. "And there's another $50,000 waiting once everything is resolved." Kenji also brought new identification documents for all three. They were temporary, but looked official. "For extra security," Kenji explained, "until we settle things with the Takeda Corporation." Jack examined the documents. They were flawless. He was now David Wilson, Karen was Susan Wilson, and Emily was Sarah Wilson. "How did you get these so fast?" Jack asked. "I have connections," Kenji replied vaguely. Over the next few weeks, Jack and his family lived a completely different life. They stayed in nice hotels, ate at restaurants, and Emily even got to buy toys she'd always wanted. They changed hotels every 3 days, as Karen had insisted, always in small towns around Portland, Beaverton, Hillsborough, Tigard. Kenji covered everything and checked in regularly to make sure they were safe. Jack began to relax. Perhaps Kenji was actually telling the truth this time. Life had been good to them, better than it had ever been. It was in the 3rd week that things started to get strange again. Jack was in the lobby of the hotel in Hillsborough when he saw a man who looked familiar. It was one of the agents who had shown up at his house with the helicopters. Jack pretended he hadn't seen the man and quickly returned to the room. "Karen, I think we've been found," said Jack, locking the door. "What do you mean?" asked Karen. Jack told her about the man in the lobby. Karen turned pale. "We need to get out of here now," she said. They packed their bags quickly and left through the back emergency exit. Jack called Kenji as they ran to the car. "Kenji, we've been found," said Jack. "One of the men who came to my house is here at the hotel." "Stay calm, Jack," said Kenji. "Did you manage to get out?" "We did. We're in the car," Jack replied. Good. Go to Aspen, the Green Valley Ranch Resort, Kenji instructed. It's more isolated, safer. Jack followed Kenji's directions, but he was starting to doubt again. How had the men managed to find them? They'd been careful, always using fake names. The Green Valley Ranch Resort was indeed remote, set in the middle of a rural property. It had only 10 rooms and few guests. At least here we'll see if anyone follows us, said Karen. That night, Jack couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about how they'd been found. He began to suspect that maybe the documents Kenji had given them had some kind of tracking. The next day, Jack decided to test his theory. He left the documents in the room and went out with Karen and Emily, taking only cash. They went into Aspen to do some shopping. The whole time, Jack stayed alert for possible pursuers. He saw nothing suspicious. When they returned to the resort, the documents were still where they'd left them. Maybe it was a coincidence, Jack told Karen. Or maybe they know exactly where we are, Karen countered. Jack, I'm starting to think we're being fooled again. Jack was also beginning to have doubts. There was something about the whole situation that didn't add up. It was during the night that Jack discovered the truth. Unable to sleep, he went for a walk through the resort's gardens. It was a clear night with a full moon and he needed fresh air to think. That's when he heard voices coming from behind the main building. He recognized one of them immediately. It was Kenji. Jack moved carefully, staying hidden behind the trees. He saw Kenji talking to 2 men he didn't recognize. They were speaking in English, but Jack could only catch fragments of the conversation. Family is cooperating, said one of the men. Just a few more weeks, Kenji replied. When do we wrap this up? The other man asked. Jack couldn't hear Kenji's answer, but what he heard was enough to confirm his suspicions. Kenji was plotting something. Jack hurried back to the room and woke Karen. Karen, we need to leave now, Jack whispered. Why? Asked Karen, groggy. Jack told her about the conversation he'd overheard. Karen was wide awake now. Jack, we've been fools again, she said. How could we have trusted him after everything that happened? Because we wanted to believe, Jack admitted. Because 100 grand was too tempting. They woke Emily and explained they had to leave immediately. The girl, tired of the whole situation, just nodded. Where are we going? Asked Karen. Home, Jack replied. We'll face whatever we have to face, but at least we'll be in our own home. They left the hotel quietly, leaving only a note saying they had a family emergency. Jack drove back to Portland, taking alternate routes and stopping several times to check if they were being followed. When they reached their street, they saw official cars parked in front of the house. This time Jack recognized them immediately. They were really from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Jack, I think this time they're real, said Karen. Jack stopped the car at a safe distance and called the general number for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I'd like to confirm if there's an ongoing operation at 127 Maple Street in Portland, Jack said to the operator. I can confirm there are federal agents at this address, the operator replied. Do you have any information about the case? I'm Jack Miller. It's my house, said Jack. Mr. Miller, the operator exclaimed. The agents have been looking for you for weeks. Where are you? I'm on my way home, Jack replied. Can I speak to the agent in charge? Jack was transferred to Agent Thompson, who identified himself as the lead on the operation. Mr. Jack, where have you been? Thompson asked. We were very worried. It's a long story, Jack replied. Can I explain in person? Of course. Come home, we'll talk, said Thompson. Jack drove to his house, this time knowing the agents were real. When they arrived, they were greeted by several federal agents, but much more cordially than the first time. Mr. Jack, thank you for coming back, said Agent Thompson. We really need your help. My help? Jack asked. Yes, we've discovered you were the victim of a complex fraud scheme, Thompson explained. Kenji Yamamoto isn't a private investigator or a spy. He's an international criminal specializing in sophisticated scams. Jack felt like he'd been punched in the gut. What do you mean, scams? He targets middle-class people, gains their trust with emotional stories, then exploits them financially, Thompson said. You weren't his first victim. Thompson showed a file with information about other similar cases. There were at least 10 families who had gone through situations like Jack's. But he gave me money, Jack said, confused. $50,000. Counterfeit money, Thompson informed him. Very well made, but fake. You didn't notice because you didn't have time to use much of it. Jack pulled out some bills he still had in his pocket. Thompson examined them with a special magnifying glass. Fake, Thompson confirmed. Perfect visually, but fake. Jack felt like the biggest fool in the world. He'd been tricked twice by the same man. What now? Jack asked. Now you're safe, said Thompson. But we need your help to capture Yamamoto and his gang. What kind of help? Jack asked. He'll try to contact you, Thompson explained. When he realizes you've fled, he'll want to know where you are. We need you to cooperate so we can locate him. Jack agreed to help. He was tired of being manipulated and wanted to see Kenji pay for his crimes. Over the next few days, Jack stayed home waiting for Kenji's call. The federal agents installed monitoring equipment on the phone and in the house. It was on Thursday that Kenji finally called. Jack, where are you? Kenji asked, clearly nervous. I got a call from the hotel saying you left in the middle of the night. Kenji, we found out the truth, Jack said, following the script he'd agreed on with the agents. We know the money was fake. Kenji was silent for a moment. Jack, I can explain. You don't need to explain anything else, Jack interrupted. I just want you to know I'm going to cooperate with the police to have you arrested. Jack, you don't understand, said Kenji, his tone shifting completely. If you cooperate with the police, your family will face the consequences. Are you threatening me? Asked Jack. I'm just stating the reality, replied Kenji, his voice now cold. I have friends who don't like snitches. The call ended, but it was enough for the agents to track Kenji's location. He was at a hotel in Vancouver, just 50 miles from Portland. We got him, said Agent Thompson. We'll arrest him today. That afternoon, the Federal Bureau of Investigation conducted a raid at the hotel in Vancouver. Kenji was arrested, along with 4 other members of his gang. They had pulled similar scams in several towns outside Seattle. Jack was called to identify Kenji at the station. When he saw him in handcuffs, he felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief that it was over, sadness at having been deceived so thoroughly. Jack, can I talk to you for a moment? Kenji asked when he saw him. Jack hesitated but decided to hear him out. Jack, I'm sorry for everything, Kenji said, genuinely remorseful. I know there's no excuse for what I did, but I want you to know I never meant to hurt your family. Then why did you do it? Asked Jack. Because I'm an addict, Kenji admitted. Addicted to gambling, to betting. I owe dangerous people a lot of money, and I pulled these scams to try and pay them back. Jack stayed silent. In a way, he understood Kenji's desperation, but it didn't justify his actions. Kenji, I hope you can recover, Jack said. But I never want to see you again in my life. I understand, Kenji replied. And Jack, thank you for giving me that ride. It was the only act of human kindness I'd received in a long time. Jack left the station with mixed emotions. In a way, he pitied Kenji, but he was relieved it was all over. When he got home, Karen and Emily were waiting anxiously. So? Asked Karen. It's over, Jack said. Kenji's been arrested, and he won't bother us anymore. Emily ran to hug her father. Dad, can we go back to normal now? Yes, sweetheart, Jack replied, holding her tight. Now we can go back to normal. That night, Jack, Karen, and Emily slept peacefully for the first time in months. The house was quiet. No helicopters, no agents, no threats. The next day, Jack went back to work as a rideshare driver. It was a simple job, but an honest one. No more dreams of getting rich quick or changing their lives overnight. In the weeks after Kenji's arrest, Jack reflected deeply on everything that had happened. He realized that while his willingness to help others was a good trait, it also made him vulnerable to manipulators. Dad, are you going to stop giving rides to strangers? Emily asked one day. Jack thought about it. No, sweetheart. I'll keep helping people, but I'll be more careful. What do you mean more careful? Emily asked. I'll help without expecting anything in return, Jack explained, and I'll be wary when people offer too much in exchange for a simple favor. Karen, who had been listening, nodded in approval. Jack, you have a good heart, she said. You just need to use your head a little more along with it. Jack smiled. He knew she was right. A few weeks later, Jack learned from Agent Thompson that Kenji had been sentenced to 8 years in prison. Other gang members were also convicted. The families who had been scammed managed to recover some of their lost money. "What about the counterfeit money he gave me?" Jack asked. "It wasn't a crime for you to have received it," explained Thompson. "You were a victim, not a criminal. But unfortunately, the money is worthless." Jack wasn't too bothered. He'd learned that money that comes too easily always brings trouble. 2 months after Kenji's arrest, Jack was working when he got a ride request to Portland International Airport. The passenger was a Japanese man in his 70s, well-dressed and polite. During the ride, the man mentioned he was visiting the United States for the first time to meet a grandson who had just been born. "My daughter married an American," the man explained. "I came to meet my first grandson." Jack listened with interest, but kept his emotions in check this time. When they arrived at the airport, the man gave him a generous tip. "Thanks for the conversation," the Japanese man said. "It was good to practice my English." "Don't mention it. Safe travels," Jack replied. Jack watched the man enter the airport and moved on to his next ride. He didn't ask for a phone number, didn't offer extra help, didn't get his hopes up. It had just been a normal ride. When he got home, he told Karen about the Japanese passenger. "So, did he offer you a job?" Karen teased. "No," Jack said, laughing. "Just a normal ride like it should be." Emily, who was doing homework, looked up. "Dad, didn't you feel like helping him with something else?" she asked. "I did," Jack admitted. "But this time I used my head. I helped. With what he needed. A ride. Nothing more, nothing less." Jack had learned his lesson. Helping others was important, but within reason. He didn't have to save the world. Just do his part. 6 months later, Jack was still driving, but he'd secured some regular clients who hired him for corporate trips. It was steadier and paid better than random app rides. Karen had landed a better job at the regional hospital with higher pay and benefits. Emily was doing well in school and had made new friends in the neighborhood. The Miller family's life wasn't rich or glamorous, but it was stable and happy. They'd learned to value simplicity and honesty. Jack never gave rides to strangers without sizing up the situation first. He was still helpful, just more cautious. A year after the whole mess with Kenji, Jack was driving through town when he saw an elderly woman standing in the rain. She looked lost, clutching a bag of medicine. Jack pulled over and rolled down the window. "Ma'am, do you need help?" he asked. "Oh, young man, I'm trying to get to the community clinic, but I got lost," the woman replied. Jack looked her over and assessed the situation. She was clearly an elderly woman in simple clothes, genuinely in need. "Hop in, I'll take you there," he said. During the ride, the woman explained she'd gone to pick up medicine for her sick husband and gotten lost on the way back. It was a simple story, no drama, no wild promises. When they reached the clinic, the woman tried to pay. "No need, ma'am," Jack said. "Just helping out." "God bless you, young man," she said as she got out. Jack watched her enter the clinic and drove off to his next ride. He'd helped someone who truly needed it. No strings attached, no complications. When he got home, he told Karen about the woman. "And she didn't offer you a job at her company?" Karen joked. "No," Jack said, laughing. "Didn't ask for my number, didn't promise to repay me, nothing. Just a normal lady who needed help." "As it should be," Karen said, smiling. Jack nodded. He'd learned the difference between genuine help and being taken advantage of. The first was rewarding, the second was dangerous. 2 years after the incident with Kenji, Jack received an unexpected call. It was Agent Thompson. "Mr. Jack, how are you?" asked Thompson. "I'm fine, Agent. Is something wrong?" replied Jack, concerned. "No, no trouble at all," Thompson reassured him. "Actually, it's good news. Kenji Yamamoto has been released for good behavior, but there's something he asked me to pass along to you." Jack tensed up. "What does he want?" "He wants to apologize in person," said Thompson. "He's getting treatment for gambling addiction. And part of his therapy is making amends to his victims, but only if you're willing, of course." Jack thought for a moment. He didn't feel anger toward Kenji, just sadness over the whole situation. Where would this meeting take place? Asked Jack. In a Federal Bureau of Investigation room under supervision, Thompson explained. Completely safe. Jack decided to accept. He felt he needed to close that chapter for good. A week later, Jack went to the Federal Bureau of Investigation for the meeting. Kenji looked different, thinner, with graying hair and a humble demeanor. He was no longer the confident man Jack had once known. "Jack, thank you for agreeing to see me," said Kenji, clearly nervous. "Hi, Kenji," Jack replied simply. "Jack, I know there's no excuse for what I did to you and your family," Kenji began. "But I want you to know I deeply regret it. You didn't deserve any of it." Jack listened in silence. "I'm in treatment for my gambling addiction," Kenji continued. "I've learned that I always justified my crimes by saying it was to pay debts. But the truth is I just couldn't stop betting." "How are you doing now?" asked Jack. "Better," Kenji answered. "It's been 215 days since I last gambled, and 580 days since my last scam. I'm working at an auto repair shop making little, but it's honest." Jack was surprised by Kenji's change. "Kenji, I forgive you," Jack said. "Not for what you did, but for myself. I don't want to carry anger." Kenji began to cry. "Jack, you're a better person than I deserve to meet." "Kenji, you deserve a second chance," Jack said. "Everyone does. But never do this to anyone again." "Never again," Kenji promised. "Jack, can I ask you something?" "Go ahead," Jack replied. "Why did you stop to give me a ride that day?" Kenji asked. Jack thought about the question. "Because you looked like you needed help. And I always help those in need. Even after everything that happened," Kenji asked. "Especially after everything that happened," Jack answered. "I've learned to help better, more carefully, but I haven't stopped helping." Kenji smiled through his tears. "Jack, you gave me more than a ride that day. You showed me there are still good people in the world." The meeting ended with the two men parting cordially. Jack left the Federal Bureau of Investigation feeling free of a weight he hadn't even realized he was carrying. When he got home, he told Karen and Emily about the meeting. "Dad, you're too kind," said Emily, hugging Jack. "Sometimes being kind complicates our lives," Jack said. "But it's better to be kind and face complications than to be cruel and live in peace." "Why?" asked Emily. "Because in the end you sleep well at night," Jack replied. Karen smiled and hugged her husband. She knew he had grown so much through the whole experience. 5 years after his first encounter with Kenji, Jack was still working as a driver, but now he had his own small executive transport business. Karen had become head nurse at the hospital. Emily was in high school and dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. The Miller family had prospered through honest, persistent work. They weren't rich, but they lived a comfortable and dignified life. Jack continued helping people, but in a more balanced way. He had learned that kindness without caution could be dangerous, but that caution without kindness made life empty. One Sunday morning, Jack was washing his car in front of the house when he saw a man walking down the street. It was Kenji. Jack stopped what he was doing and watched. Kenji was dressed in simple work clothes, carrying a backpack. When he saw Jack, he hesitated before approaching. "Hi, Jack," Kenji said timidly. "Hi, Kenji," Jack replied. "What are you doing here?" "I'm working at a shop nearby," Kenji explained. "I just stopped by to see if you were doing okay. I don't want to bother you." Jack could see Kenji was truly different now. There was no more manipulative charm, just a simple person trying to rebuild his life. "Want to have some coffee?" Jack offered. Kenji hesitated. "I don't want to interrupt your family Sunday." "You're not interrupting," Jack insisted. "Karen made cake." They sat on the porch, and Kenji shared how his life was going. He had gotten a steady job at a repair shop, lived in a modest boarding house, and was continuing treatment for his gambling addiction. "Jack, sometimes I think about that day with the ride," Kenji said, "and I wonder how different my life would have been if I had accepted your help honestly instead of trying to take advantage." "How so?" Jack asked. "If I had just thanked you for the ride and gone on my way," Kenji explained. "Maybe I could have solved my problems the right way." Jack thought about the comment. "Kenji, I think everyone has to go through what they need to go through to learn what they need to learn." "You think I needed to go through all that?" "Kenji, asked. I think you needed to learn that you can't solve problems by creating bigger ones, Jack replied. And I needed to learn that kindness without care can be dangerous. Kenji nodded. Jack, can I say something? Of course, Jack answered. You're one of the wisest people I've ever met, Kenji said. And you don't have a degree, money, or power, but you have wisdom. Jack was moved by the words. Kenji, I think wisdom comes from making mistakes and learning from them. They talked for another hour about life, family, work, and dreams. When Kenji got up to leave, Jack felt he had truly forgiven everything that had happened. Kenji, if you ever need something, honestly, you can come to me, Jack said. Thank you, Jack, Kenji replied. But I think I know how to manage on my own now, the right way. Jack watched Kenji walk away down the street. He was a different man from the one he had met years ago. Sometimes Jack thought, people really could change. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. 10 years after their first meeting, Jack was celebrating his 50th birthday at home with his family. Karen had prepared a small party with some neighbors and close friends. Emily, now a licensed veterinarian, worked at a local clinic and was engaged to a young man Jack approved of. Life had followed its natural course without major drama or upheaval. During the party, a neighbor remarked, Jack, remember that time? Your house turned into a helicopter landing pad? Everyone laughed at the memory. The story had become a family joke, always told with good humor. Jack can find trouble even when he's trying to help, Karen teased. But in the end, everything worked out, Emily defended. Dad always does the right thing even when it goes wrong. Jack smiled, looking at his family and friends gathered around. He had learned that life was made of small, happy moments, not grand adventures or sudden fortunes. That night, after everyone had left, Jack was tidying up the house when Karen approached him. Jack, do you regret giving that ride to Kenji? She asked. Jack thought about the question. No, I don't regret it. Why not? Karen pressed, curious. Because I learned a lot, Jack replied. I learned that kindness is important, but so is caution. I learned we can't save everyone, but we can help sometimes. I learned that easy money always comes at a high price. And would you still give a ride to a stranger? Karen insisted. Jack smiled. I would, but now I'd know the difference between helping someone and being used by someone. Karen hugged her husband. She knew he had become wiser without losing the good heart he'd always had. 15 years after first meeting Kenji, Jack was at work when he received an unexpected call. A young woman's voice spoke. Mr. Jack? My name is Naomi Yamamoto, she said. Jack froze. Yamamoto? I'm Kenji Yamamoto's daughter, the woman explained. My father asked me to call you. Jack's heart raced. Is something wrong with him? He's in the hospital, Naomi said. He had a heart issue. He's stable now, but he wanted me to reach out to you. Jack hesitated. He hadn't spoken to Kenji in years. What does he want? He wants to see you one last time, Naomi replied. He said he has something important to tell you. Jack agreed to visit Kenji at the hospital. When he arrived, he found a much older man, thin but with clear eyes. Jack, thank you for coming, Kenji said, extending his hand. How are you? Jack asked. Better than I deserve to be, Kenji answered with a weak smile. Jack, I called you here because I need to tell you something. Jack sat in the chair beside the bed. Remember when I told you I didn't have a sister? Kenji asked. I remember, Jack said. That was a lie, Kenji admitted. I did have a sister, and she really was sick in a hospital in Portland. Jack was confused. What do you mean? My sister was at Mercy General Hospital the day we met, Kenji explained. But she wasn't elderly. She was younger than me and had cancer. Jack didn't know what to say. I was desperate that day because the doctors said she only had hours left, Kenji continued. When you gave me that ride, I made it in time to say goodbye to her. Jack felt a chill. So part of your story was true? The most important part was true, Kenji confirmed. You really did help me in the hardest moment of my life. Everything that came after was because of my sickness. my addiction. Kenji picked up a photo from the nightstand and showed it to Jack. It was a picture of a Japanese woman in her 40s, smiling. "This was my sister, Naomi," Kenji said. "My daughter is named after her." Jack looked at the photo and felt a deep emotion. Somehow that ride had truly mattered. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" Jack asked. "Because I was ashamed," Kenji admitted. "I had used your kindness for criminal purposes. I didn't deserve for you to know I'd also done something good." Jack was moved. "Kenji, even with all your mistakes, there was something real in you." "Jack, I want you to know that ride saved more than you realize," Kenji said. "Not only did it take me to my sister, but it showed me there was still kindness in the world. That's what gave me the strength to change my life years later." Jack held Kenji's hand. "Kenji, thank you for telling me this." "Jack, there's one more thing," said Kenji. "When I leave the hospital, I'm going back to Japan. My daughter got a job there and wants me to come live with her." "It's a good opportunity," said Jack. "It's a fresh start," Kenji agreed. "Jack, I want you to know you were the most important person I met in the United States. You taught me what true kindness means." Jack said goodbye to Kenji, knowing he'd probably never see him again. But this time the farewell was peaceful. No resentment, no hard feelings. When he got home, he told Karen about his conversation with Kenji. "So, part of his story was true?" Karen asked. "The part that mattered was true," Jack replied. Amid all the lies, there was one important truth. He desperately needed help that day. "And you gave him the help he needed," Karen said. "I gave him a ride," Jack corrected. Simple as that. Jack went back to his usual routine in the days that followed, but he felt different. Knowing his ride had truly made a difference in someone's life gave new meaning to everything that had happened. 2 weeks later, Jack received a letter from Japan. It was from Kenji. "Jack, we arrived safely in Japan. My daughter is happy to have her father close again. I'm working in a public garden here in Tokyo, tending to the plants. It's simple work, but it's good for me. I want you to know I think of you every time I help someone in need. I learned from you that true kindness doesn't expect anything in return. It just happens. Thank you so much for that ride. Thank you for showing me who I could be. Your friend, Kenji Yamamoto." Jack tucked the letter into a special drawer, alongside other important family keepsakes. 20 years after their first meeting, Jack was retiring from his job as a driver. He'd saved enough money to buy a better house and secure a comfortable future for his family. On his last day of work, Jack decided to give one special ride. He drove to Mercy General Hospital, where he'd taken Kenji so many years ago. He parked in front and watched the movement, doctors, nurses, families all coming and going with their own stories, their own struggles, their own needs. Jack thought about all the rides he'd given over the years, some ordinary, some troublesome, some unforgettable, but each one had taught him something. As he was leaving, he spotted an elderly woman standing in the rain, clearly lost. Jack pulled over and approached her. "Ma'am, can I help you?" he asked. "Oh, young man, I'm looking for the emergency room, but I can't find it," she replied. "Come on, I'll show you where it is," Jack said, offering his arm for support. He walked her to the emergency room entrance. She thanked him and went inside. Jack returned to his car, knowing he'd done the right thing. A simple help, no complications, no expectations, exactly as it should be. When he got home, Karen was waiting with a cake to celebrate his retirement. "How was your last day?" she asked. "Perfect," Jack said. "I ended it the way I started, helping someone who needed it." "And this time, no helicopters showed up?" teased Emily, who had come to visit. "No," Jack laughed. "This time it was just a normal help like it should be." Jack looked out the window at his backyard, where so many years ago helicopters had landed, changing his life forever. Now it was just an ordinary yard, green grass and a few flowers Karen had planted. But Jack knew that yard held an important story. The story of how a simple ride could change 2 lives in completely unexpected ways. Jack had learned that kindness is always important, but wisdom is essential. He had learned that helping others is a duty, but protecting family is the priority. He had learned that life is unpredictable, but honesty always prevails. And most importantly, He had learned that sometimes a ride is just a ride, but sometimes it can be the most important moment in someone's life. Jack Miller continued giving rides sporadically, even after retiring, but now he knew exactly when to stop, when to help, and when to simply move on, and no more helicopters ever landed in his backyard. 30 years after that first ride, Jack was a grandfather to 3 grandchildren. Emily had married and carried on the family tradition of kindness, balanced with prudence. One Sunday afternoon, Jack was playing with his grandchildren in the backyard when the oldest, an 8-year-old, asked, "Grandpa, is it true that helicopters once landed here in our backyard?" Jack smiled, looking up at the clear blue sky where no helicopters were in sight. "Yes, it's true," Jack replied, "but that happened because Grandpa learned an important lesson." "What lesson?" the boy asked. "That helping others is always right, but you have to use your head too," Jack explained. "Kindness with wisdom is the best combination there is." The boy nodded, even if he didn't fully understand. But Jack knew one day he would. Jack looked around the backyard again, at the house, at his gathered family. It had been a long and complicated journey since that first ride, but in the end everything had worked out as well as it could. He had kept his kind-hearted nature but gained wisdom. He had protected his family but never stopped helping others. He had faced consequences but hadn't grown bitter. And most importantly, he had learned that sometimes life's greatest adventures begin with the simplest gestures. Jack Miller never regretted giving that ride to Kenji Yamamoto, because in the end, that ride hadn't just changed Kenji's life. It had changed Jack's life too, making him a better, wiser, more balanced person. And that was the real lesson of the story, that true kindness is always worth it, even when it complicates our lives temporarily. Because in the end, complications pass, but the good we do in the world lasts forever. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of Jack's incredible journey and where you're watching from. If you've ever been in a similar situation or have any reflections to share, leave us a sincere comment. Do you think Jack made the right choice to keep helping people even after all the trouble? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other heartwarming stories like this one.